Hi everyone, welcome to the opening panel of Freelance Futures, our online gathering this week, which is the first of several panels, workshops and wellbeing sessions. So this event is part of Freelance Futures, a summer program of learning and action for equitable conditions in culture. My name is Junlin Goh, and I am a cultural organizer with Migrants in Culture and What Next. I'm a Southeast Asian woman with long black hair and a blunt fringe, today wearing a cream vest against a honey painted wall. And in this session, I'm co-chairing with Richard Watts from People Make It Work, and joined by our fellow members of the freelancer-led consortium that have been organizing Freelance Futures, Lizzie Crump from What Next, Tracy Gentles from Something to Aim For, and Andrew Watts from Max Artists and Music Exchange. We are missing members from Ink Arts and Freelancers Make Theatre Work, but they'll be joining us in our closing panel this Friday, 1 p.m. So before we start, let's outline some access and some other important information. This session is being recorded and will be permanently available to view via our dedicated YouTube channel or via the website or community platform. Today we have Clear Text, MyClearText, providing live captioning. To access this link, please click the closed captions button. And it's possible to access this as a full transcript or an on-screen as captions. I'll just take a brief pause whilst those who need to activate captioning can do that. Okay, thanks. And Interpreters of Colour Network are providing our BSO interpretation today. Our interpreter is Rachel Jones, and her image is pinned so she can be seen at all times. So Freelance Futures is a call for collective learning and action to build equitable conditions for freelancers working in culture. It will take all our efforts to affect real change, so we welcome all your insights and experiences as independent practitioners and practitioners working within cultural organizations, unions, funding bodies, and in policy making. So given that we need all of us, this is our basic code of conduct for today. Please respect and value your collaborators in this room. Be aware of your privilege, know when to make space and when to take space. Avoid overcomplicated language and explain technical terms. And remember, we're all at different stages of learning, so please respect the person and challenge the idea. So this is a relaxed environment. Feel free to access this event in any way that makes participating work for you. If possible, start off with your video option to welcome our speakers and contributors. And if you've got a question or point to raise today, use your raise hand function in the reaction tool, or type in the word in capital letters question in the chat function and we'll come to you. So that's the introduction. The purpose of the panel today is to give context and to frame the work of Freelance Futures. And we thought we might do this by asking one another a set of questions. So I'm now going to pass over to Richard to set this up for us, and after which we'll have time to have a conversation and to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Junlin. My name's Richard Watts, and I'm one of the directors at People Make It Work. I'm a white man, I'm 53, and I'm wearing a black shirt and clear frame glasses today, and I've got short balding hair. And the questions that we thought we might ask each other are threefold. And I'm shortly going to be asking Tracy Gentles to start us off with some answers. So Tracy, you might talk to us about what motivated you to be involved in organising Freelance Futures, what you hope to achieve across the areas of sector organising, rights and resources, thinking about organisational change and policy making. And one action or request that you're asking of people this week. Tracy, do you want to get us started?
Brilliant. Hello, my name is Tracy Gentles. I am a brown-skinned person with short brown hair, wearing thick rimmed glasses and a stripy top. I am sat in front of a white bookshelf with picture frames and a plant on top, blinds to one side, post-its to the other. My pronouns are she, her. I am reading this today. I am the creative director, CEO of Something to Aim For, which is also known as STAFF, a charity set up in 2019 to build on the work of previous organisations in Company Collective, a producing organisation supporting artists to make step changes in their careers, and our now continuing arts, health and social change programme, The Sick of the Fringe. Originally, our remit could be defined as supporting artists at risk of sector dropout due to aspects of their identities, such as race, social class, sexuality, disability, to make critical work about the health of society. Helping artists negotiate any disconnect between their lived experience and the structures, for example, funders, venues, festivals they wish to engage with, helping them to push their practice through systems of oppression in order to be seen. This remit has gained momentum, expanded and deepened since March 2020. So what motivates me to organise Freelance Futures? Since the bottom fell out of the world, and most definitely the creative industries, we've been working to build STAFF as an infrastructure support organisation for those that remain at the margins of the arts and society in general, recognising that we are not all safe until we are all safe, and that those voices outside of mainstream conversations may be the key to the new strategies and ideas needed to ensure that we move forward in more equitable ways and we never go back to navigating oppressive structures in the ways we did before. We recognise that perhaps those that are holding the most cultural capital at this time may be the ones with the least support systems in place, those outside of formal structures, freelancers by choice or not. These might be the dynamic organisers that are enacting or experimenting with new ways of working that we can, 1, learn from, 2, give more space to and celebrate, or 3, better support, perhaps the most important. It is this, as well as the beauty of allyship and working alongside other different entities in developing this programme, why I and staff are excited to be here and what motivates us. So what do we hope to achieve? So since 2021, we have been engaging with research as an embedded function of staff's work, connecting with the business school at Queen Mary's University of London to look deeply with members of the sector at intersectional inequality as exclusionary factors in accessing and progressing in the creative industries, specifically looking in the first instance at race and class. We hope our contributions to this programme start to move our findings from action research towards actionable support, and that this movement is this movement that we hope to achieve through this programme. I see this programme as potentially a really fantastic listening device, and I am deeply interested in listening and learning. However, I am not really interested in purely interesting research or interesting ideas, because things are really difficult and campaign fatigue and burnout are real. I am interested in actionable and the useful. I therefore hope this space can give us time to meditate on the interesting and painful and meditate on that change, but that there is focus and an elevation and mobilisation of mechanisms of support. And if we can support at staff, we will. And we hope if you can, you will too. So requests for the week. We firmly believe that access and inclusion do not thrive in competition, And there is more that we need to do, but this can only be done together. Although there has been a hell of a lot of transformation already, both internally and externally, there is a long way to go. And this continues to be really painful. I think for these reasons, and for those that I've mentioned earlier, the request I have from everyone this week is that we foreground generosity in our interactions, but also that we do interact if we can. We want to connect and build community around ideas so that we know what resonates and could support what people need and what people want. So I would encourage using the hashtag Freelance Futures or catching staff on our socials. We are really listening and we do really care. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Beautiful. So I'm going to share some thoughts next, and then I'll be coming to Lizzie Crump for her to share her perspectives before we hear from Andrew and then June Lin, at which stage June Lin will invite some questions and comments from others who are here in this space today. I work for a company called People Make It Work, and we're made up of 60 freelancers who are all committed to supporting the cultural sector to change, develop and transform. And we tend to do that through working with organisations to help them realise their ambitions to change and evolve, and then to work with groups and communities to support individuals to fill the spaces and make spaces for themselves to be heard. We believe really strongly that the arts and culture that our sector makes shapes our nation and our communities, and shapes the way we understand the world through the eyes and in the shoes of others. So it's essential that everyone is making that work. And what we know is that certain groups across society are more often excluded from making our art and culture. And that means it connects less effectively with all of us. And so when we think about those of us who work in a freelance capacity, we know too that more of those who are excluded from arts and culture are also excluded from permanent positions and positions of power within the cultural sector. And I think that's why People Make It Work wanted to be part of this coalition. I think we believe that the answer to supporting more equitable conditions in culture isn't that every freelancer becomes an employee. It's that every human is treated like a human, and that we create universal conditions of work across the sector, which are fair and have parity and create a sense of an equality of agency, voice and effect. And so that requires us all to make change. It isn't just down to individual freelancers to create those conditions. It's down to policymakers, funders, organisations, individuals, unions, collectively to make that happen. So all of those things mean that none of us can make change on our own, and we need to work together. As a coalition, the group that are here today have come together to create this platform and invite everyone to take part in this process. I feel like we've learnt enough. We know enough about what some of the solutions are, and we need collective action, and we can only do that together. So I think we're really interested in creating communities and thinking about the conditions we need. How do we create the conditions that enable parity and equity to thrive? When I think about what we're hoping to achieve from our involvement, I think I'm thinking more about change at the level of organisations. So I'm hoping at the end of this week and at the end of the time that we're working together, we'll have adopted some changes at an organisational level. We'll have clearer contracts. We'll have more parity of benefits and support. We'll be offering stronger, inclusive practices, and we'll have embedded those in the cultures of our organisations in ways that benefit everyone, including freelance cultural workers. And so I think my focus is towards that, and recognising that only that is about organisations creating conditions that are more welcoming, enabling and equitable. And if I think about an action that I'm asking for at this moment, it's really invite your ecosystem, invite all those who are needed with you to be having this conversation together, hearing similar conversations, being part of similar discussions. Collaborate with that ecosystem to assess the practices in your organisation or the organisations you work with, and set some priority changes that you'd like to make. Use the toolkit that we've created and is on the Freelance Futures website to enable that. So my action, I guess, is about bringing people together in order to collectively organise and make change in the place that you have some agency or that you can affect if it's beyond your control. I'm now going to invite Lizzie Crump, to answer our 3 questions and contribute to this discussion. Over to you, Lizzie.
Afternoon, everyone. It's a real joy and a pleasure to be here. I'm Lizzie Crump from What Next. I am a woman wearing a pair of glasses, my customary enormous earrings, which are some big like seabird type wings today, and I'm sitting in my bedroom in East London. It's really hard to answer similar questions to your esteemed colleagues because A, they say brilliant things beautifully, and also because I agree with them. So I don't want to repeat a lot of what they said, more sort of support and scaffold, particularly some of the stuff that Tracy was saying at the beginning. But for anybody who doesn't know about What Next, it's a free to access movement, and we bring together freelancers, small and large organisations together to debate and shape arts and culture for a more equitable future in the UK. And just looking at the list of colleagues that have joined this, I can see many who we've engaged with or who we know, and it's lovely to see you in this room. So one of the reasons we wanted to be part of this is, the core mission of What Next. We want to see a situation in the UK in which arts and culture are playing a vital contribution to creating a more equitable society, improving quality of life for all. And we think that vision will happen when our sector works together to take ownership of that civic role of arts and culture, and also our sector leadership reflects the full diversity of our communities. And then thirdly, when everyone is able to access the full benefits of arts and culture. So the way we work is we convene a space, a UK-wide space, and lots of local spaces that are held by chapters. We have around 30 of those across the UK, which bring together that breadth of voices and leadership. So those freelancers, small orgs, large orgs, and policymakers. And it's worth saying that everyone in the core team of What Next is a freelancer. So we are a freelance-led movement. What we try and do is we try to think about policy making, we think about shared priorities, collective responses, and we work to engage policymakers at local and national level in the sector and in government with those issues and the things that we want to change. We aspire to be building conditions to share good practice and build some systems leadership within the movement of peers with diverse skills and experiences. So some of the things that we want to achieve is that people feel, the members and chapters that are most impacted by policy feel more skilled to advocate and shift it. So part of the reason we want to be part of this is to skill ourselves up, to skill our colleagues up, and to talk about what we need in order to be making that case in the most effective way that we can. We want to work together more effectively. We want to value that breadth of leadership and influence in that wider sector, and we want to share good practice on how to do that. And we want everyone to feel connected, well informed, and recognise their own leadership and agency in that space. So for us, this symposium ticks so many of those boxes. It's right in our wheelhouse. So we were delighted, but also delighted to be in a consortia with so many other freelancers that are bringing their perspective and their expertise and their lived experience to that space. So I think for What Next particularly, we've already learned through the process of creating our symposium with other freelancers and other collectives more about how we build our mission and that equitable future together. So that's been great for us. I mean, our history is to bring together that full ecology of the sector. And I just want to acknowledge how complex and complicated and how hard that is. And it's, you know, as a movement that's been going for a decade, you know, we have struggled to do that effectively a lot. And I'm sure we will do so in the future. So to have some moments to invest in that thinking through this symposium and think that through are really valuable. We hope that this whole process is about achieving that mission, but particularly as a movement that is so concerned with and interested in conversation. For us, what we really want to achieve through this is a better conversation. So the tools for that, how we talk to each other, where we talk to each other, whose voices are at the table, who has power in that space, are all things that we're really interested in as part of this process. We hope that we are flexible and responsive, and this is going to be a learning opportunity for everybody that's involved with us. So my action, really similar to Tracy's, was going to be about forensic listening, and that's an action for me as much as it is that I'm asking for everybody. I think, you know, I've been in the sector for, you know, a couple of decades. I've worked a lot in policy, and I think what I'm trying to hold in my head is that I don't know the answers. I can be part of a better conversation, and thinking about that sort of forensic listening to colleagues and each other, I think is the thing that I'm most looking forward to and I'm most thinking through. I don't think there's going to be a list of easy answers, but I do hope that the outcome will be a much stronger discussion and set of networks and relationships and trust that we build with each other. I'm going to pass on now to Andrew. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lizzie. It's always very difficult coming in at sort of fourth in the list because everyone said everything you've strategically planned. My name is Andrew Watts. I'm a white male. I'm 54 years old. I'm wearing glasses. I have medium length, long shoulder length brown hair. I have a blue shirt with white flowers on it. And I'm in my house in East London also. I'm just to check the other bedrooms that Liz is not hiding in them. So Max Musicians and Artists Exchange was set up in May 2020 as a response to the pandemic, and as a musician, as an international opera singer myself, with other musicians and other artists, we came together to look at how our sector was behaving and to try and offer support to each other. Now, during the course of the last year, we've set up a little bit of a mission. So Max is a think tank with a vision of cultural landscape where all the arts play a central role in society. And as we know, we have to start once again as the sector opens up to build from the ground base level, from the center of the community, center of society. Max is a listening space from which we will work to build a sustainable future for all artists, which is a fairly grand claim, but it's absolutely possible given the symposium that we're sitting through at the moment. Max is founded on a core belief in promoting diversity and equality. Max advocates for artist-led work and a drive for greater equality between independent artists and the organizations with whom they work. And finally, Max will collaborate with organizations and artists to challenge existing orthodoxies and to develop new practices, and is open, supportive, and collaborative in manner and accessible to everyone. So it's not just really a tiny group of people sitting in a room going, oh, what are we going to do? We are ready for action. We are about to launch a thing called Max Mentors, where you have direct contact with artists and advice givers and policymakers, looking at various different facets of this sector that we're in. I think that the motivation for organizing this was Max is still very, very young. And for me, as its founder and its artistic director, the opportunity to firstly hang out with some extraordinary people has been such a joy, to learn from the minds of people who I switch off a Zoom and have to go and look up what they've just been talking about is fascinating. So it's opened my eyes. And Max, I think, has benefited from all the allyships and the friendships. Let's not get that. We've not actually, a lot of us have not actually ever met each other face to face. So we're in that situation where we have a Zoom, and I'm sure everyone's going to be either taller or smaller than I think they actually are when they stand up. So we're at this sort of thing of wanting to work together. I think the allyship is really important. My hope for the sector is that we actually will listen to each other and we will join with each other. So often we know that organizations can stick their elbows out and bustle to the front because they want the glory of what they're trying to achieve. Actually, what I see in this group of people is a real, okay, I don't have the answers, but somebody else does. Oh no, I've got this idea. What do you think? And it's very malleable, like a plasticine model. And I think we keep adding bits to it and taking bits away. And actually the ability to listen to each other and let somebody else have their voice, to let somebody else have a view which you may vehemently disagree with and which you're allowed to give an opinion, to be heard. And I think it's probably the 3 L's: listen, learn, and lead, but lead better for a sector as a group. And really just to feel that actually we're not all alone in our rooms. There is a sector out there. If we join with allyship, we join and respect each other. And as I say to my 2 children, try to be kind. Remember what comes out of your mouth, actually other people are affected by. That is what I hope we achieve. My request would be that be open, be awake, be alive, and just actually be yourself and be creative. Thank you. I'll hand over to Junlin.
So Andrew, if you were worried about being 4th in line, imagine what it's like to be 5th in line.
Exactly.
Super, thank you. I've really enjoyed what everyone's said because everything chimes. It feels very real. It feels very hopeful, and hope is a cultivated practice. So it's not easy being hopeful, and I want to acknowledge that. So again, my name is Junlin Goh. Lizzie's talked about what next, so I'll just briefly speak about Migrants and Culture. So Migrants and Culture is a network of migrant culture workers that was set up in 2018 to make visible and to challenge the impact of the hostile environment policy on the making of culture. At the moment, we're going through organizational development to imagine what it might be to be a migrant-led design agency. So to think about design expansively as nurturing creative organizing skills, as building community infrastructure, and as embedding and articulating migrant methodologies into what we do. So part of the reason why we're thinking about organizational development is that as freelancers with experiences of discrimination because of our legal status, racial stereotyping and exoticization, we felt like we needed to think about what were the infrastructures we built for ourselves and for people that are being marginalized in the culture sector alongside other sectors. So infrastructure is really important to us, and the reason why we wanted to organize as part of this wonderful coalition of other partners and members is that the question always comes back to us: who has the choice to be in the arts for life and who doesn't? And if we want to change this, what are the conditions to make it possible, sustainable, and fulfilling for all of us? And one text that we come back to often is Aurora Levins-Morales's book called Medicine Stories, Essays for Radicals. And I often read this because it's so wonderful, and it gives a sense of the metaphor of the journey and what we're trying to build towards. So Bear with me, it's just one paragraph, but I think it articulates what we want. So this is from Medicine Stories. Travelers setting out on long journeys have to pack responsibly. We need food and water, first aid kits and flashlights, journals and harmonicas, sun hats and thermal underwear, and really good shoes. As radicals with long-term plans, we need to prepare for whole lifetimes of challenging work. We need to keep inventing and honing practices that keep us fit. This means consciously building our toolkits and medicine bags, facing and recovering from the traumas of ongoing violent oppression in the middle of trying to dismantle it, channeling grief and outrage into more finely honed visions, more powerful and effective strategies, stronger and more open love for our people, instead of letting them drag us into urgency, impatience, infighting, burnout, or giving up. And what we always take from that is much what everyone's been talking about, like what are those, how do we build skillful capacity within ourselves and one another to make change? Or in her words, our toolkits and medicine bags, and how we're always updating those for the journey ahead, and acknowledging that this will be a long time, a long journey. So what we're expecting from this week is that it's not going to be the magic answer. I hear people's cynicism. I meet you there as well with hope. And I recognize this is not the first and not the last event around equity of working conditions pre or post pandemic. But I hope that we build our skills. And what I really hope, alongside what everyone has said, so I won't repeat, is that we really think about the infrastructures that facilitate and redistribute our resources and access to relationships. So I'm very focused on this term infrastructure at the moment, because it's also about stewardship, and it allows us to think outside the individual and also outside within this time span that we're in, to people that have gone before us and people that will come after us. So what is that much longer term game plan we're talking about? So the invitation is to really think about administration and organizational structures and policies and infrastructures like mentorship, governance, unions and networks, not as boring or as scary work that other people will do because it's their job, but as a real site for creative and imaginative potential, and for us to really think about those daily structures that we're in and to imbue it as intergenerational infrastructure that has the possibility of shifting us forward. So that, I think we've done our round now. Well done. There's more people that have actually arrived into the space, so that's super. We're going to open up this Zoom room for any questions. If you've got questions, just type in questions and we'll come to you, or you can just directly type your question into the chat box. But maybe, should I start us off with one question? If there's nothing in the chat box yet. I'm interested in how we navigate that leap from the reality that we're in, and all those hopes that we talked about. What sustains us, or what keeps us bridging the reality we're facing right now and to those hopes and expectations that we have. And yeah, any tools, any way, practices that people are using at the moment, I'd really like to hear them.
Thanks, Jean Lynn. Loving the question. And I'll offer a opening answer, and then let's hear from some of our colleagues. I feel like for me, I really welcome the tension between cynicism, a sense of overwhelm, a belief that somebody else needs to fix this, with hope and agency. I feel like they're both completely reasonable, intelligent, insightful, emotionally intelligent responses. And so I feel like it's important for me personally to value both of those things, and like not try and defeat skepticism, but like it's really sensible to be skeptical. And if somebody kind of dismisses or diminishes that reaction, I feel quite frustrated. So I want to sort of hold both, which is to say, we live in a world that's imperfect. We live in a world that's stuck with inequity that's unequal. And it's also true that things through individual choices and collective effort get better as well as worse, and that it's possible that we can make some really exciting shifts. So for me, the thing that helps with that sense of exhaustion is holding on to both things and not being wrong on either occasion, and maybe looking for, where do I get my reality fix when I'm over hopeful, and where do I get my hope fix when I'm feeling a bit defeated. And that's from community, that's from knowing who else might bring like a little tonic in one way or the other. So that's what occurred to me when I heard your question. Who else would like to respond to Jean Lynn's question about strategies for balancing, navigating the leap between hope and what else sustains us? Tracy.
I'm really enjoying the work we're doing around new leadership models, and we've got an event tomorrow, 8:30, exploring that. Because I think the people that we're speaking to don't necessarily see themselves as leaders, and these are people that I'm following and will do more so now. And I think that when we're looking for this alternate future in the way that we work together, we have to stop looking for the structures that, you know, I'm in a structure with a title that says I'm the leader of that specific structure, but the freelancers I've been speaking to recently and through the research do not see themselves as leaders. And as soon as they talk about their work within that frame, there's an actual complete internal change to how they look at their work. And I think it's that as we're restructuring external factors through policies and paperwork and admin, I think there's an internal restructuring that has to happen to meet that gap. So I think that that's what I'm interested in. Some of the work that we're doing is how to open up those spaces of thinking about yourselves. And that's a change of how we look at language, as well as we look at like the idea of leading and what that can mean as we're trying to find better ways to work together. So I would say I'm getting a lot of energy from those conversations, because they're opening up a different way of working with people and thinking about how we're organising together and the potential of that.
Can I just come in with a couple of thoughts to Julian's question? And looking at some of the chat from Julia and Helen, the fact that we're able to have these conversations and it's not so we all talk about hope. And I think I've spent the last 2 years thinking about partly thinking about the silver lining of of the COVID pandemic, which there has to be a silver lining somewhere. Often we all do feel that the hope disappears and we don't find what it is. My hope, the one silver lining for me, is I have 2 adopted children with my husband, and I got to spend a year with them, which was amazing. But actually the hope now is that we are all having these conversations. Julia's talking about living in Shropshire in the middle of the rural thing, and Helen's hoping that there's action and things moving on. And we're having these conversations, and we would never have had time to even begin to have these conversations because we'd have carried on with the way we were going. Everything was fine, and the gatekeepers would be the gatekeepers, and everything would be as sort of okay as it has been. But now we have a moment to set back, to reset, and actually give ourselves permission to lead. Give ourselves permission to set up our own administration of how we see ourselves within the sector, how we see our own advocacy, and actually to take a little bit of control. It's not enough to say, oh, here's a contract, do your job. No, we want to be, as artists and freelancers, we want to be in charge of what it is we're doing. So we have some ownership of our work and ownership of our output and some real credibility. And anybody who has survived this needs to remember, pat yourself on the back for still being here on a Zoom on the 13th of June 2022, that actually 2 years and 2 months since, I'm not going to say the government, since we were locked down, and we all didn't party in Westminster, I don't think, we are now in that position to be able to say, yes, we're now going to talk, we're going to listen, and that hope is beginning to burn bright. I know it sounds a little bit poetic, but that's the opera singer in me. Thank you.
Lizzie, do you want to pick up the thread?
Yeah, I was just sort of thinking about a session that we did as part of this with Emma Jane Park at What Next this week, where we were thinking about and EJ, I think you're in the room, so hello if you are, but we were thinking about radical change and that sort of relationship between small, granular, practical steps that you can take within a system that often feel like the first thing that you can control and that you can move in that space, and then reimagining something on a grand scale and actually thinking, if we had a blank piece of paper here and we redo the ecology of the cultural sector, what would we want to see? And I think for my work personally, when you're sort of working in policy, those two things can be really hard to sort of hold together. You want to be practical, you want to be creating change that's, you know, tangible and has got a route where people can see the outcome of the work that you're doing. But if you only do that bit of work, you just end up sort of tinkering around the edges of systems that are broken. So you have to do that sort of policy work alongside that bit of thinking, which is what's the blue sky, what's the absolutely, you know, best model that we could think about. And so the question that was in my head after that session was, you know, how do we, what are the practical, tangible policy changes we can make now that lead to the best groundwork for radical change? Like, how do we use the radical change to impact the small changes and work back from that, rather than forward from, we know it's broken, we want to tinker with it? So that's what's sort of sitting in my head at the moment. But I was also just reading in the comments, and there's a comment about sort of the exhaustion and lack of capacity in our system. And this is something that I said in that session that we did this week too, is that the bench isn't deep enough. And we need more resource for our colleagues, our freelance colleagues, to be having these discussions. So many people are, you know, delivering their own creative practice, you know, keeping the lights on in their businesses while trying to enact change. They are challenging on many levels, they're building on many levels. It's a really, really exhausting place to be. And even with that hope that Julian's brought into the conversation, which is brilliant. So yeah, I think for me, I'm just thinking that we have to be able to resource the conversation that you're talking about, Andrew, in the long term. We have to give people that sort of paid, equitable space to be having that conversation in a long term. And we have to allow people to step away and replenish and be in another space and then come back in, knowing that there's somebody on the bench that's going to be there to take their place. So I think for me, those are just some of the things that are sort of bubbling in my mind so far as a response to the symposia.
Thanks, Lizzie. I noticed a question from Morven in the chat, which really relates to what you've just been saying about the capacity. Where's the space to make the actionable change as we are in this sort of race back to normal? And I wondered whether, Junlin, whether you had anything to any response to that question about how do we make space for thoughtful, appropriate action when we're also kind of chasing to get back to somewhere and under pressure to kind of deliver within the status quo.
Oh, Morven, I think that's what we're all asking. So it's a really, it's a hard one, and I can't be presumptuous of anyone or your circumstances at the moment, because I know we have a lot of competing challenges and commitments that we're each facing. I think when Richard was speaking about, or actually many of us were speaking about recognizing our part in the ecology, I think there's something about that we don't have to be everything and everyone, that actually we can just hone in on something that we're really passionate about, the issues that really impact us, and then work in alliance with others dealing with a lived experience of something else or a passion in something else. I think often it becomes unmanageable when we're trying to do everything instead of working in alliance or in wider coalitional structures. So I think personally for me, that's been the learning of the last 2 years. I would say pre-pandemic, I was involved in about 4 networks, and really 4 hard networks of doing hard organizing on lots of different fronts. And I burnt out within the first year of the pandemic, really. And I'm still on that process of letting go of commitments and relationships that I was really invested in and care deeply about. But I'm coming to the realization, which maybe is very late for myself, is that I'm one body with very limited capacity, and I can only do a few things or one thing well. But acknowledging that I can still work alongside other networks and ensure that my work has a very intersectional perspective. So yeah, letting go has been one strategy that I have used. Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone else has other thoughts on this, but it's a really good question. And I think it's something that we're all learning how to do in our own ways.
Anyone else want to say anything? Thanks, Junlin. Does anyone want to say anything else about how do we make space at this time for these actions? The thing that occurs to me as we go on, Tracy.
I was just going to say, I think people are making space. Like, there are buildings who are, connecting with freelancers in completely different ways. I think what Junlin was saying about the circumstances that you're in, I think that it's the listening and actually connecting with what people are doing at the moment, because there is a lot of strategies that are really amazing happening. And I think that bringing those to the fore and seeing how they're being put together, there's some that we're talking about tomorrow in terms of buildings, but working with freelancers on their senior leadership team to make that change. And I think it's about how people are managing their risk. Like, it depends if you can make that change. In terms of staff, we were just about to launch a program as the pandemic hit. So we were able to pivot our operations. So we've really lent into the idea of using our research in an actionable way so that we can build programs around that, the findings, to help people. And that's what we're doing. So I think there is a lot out there. We need to really celebrate them and bring them to the fore. People need to be talking about them in a way that is clear and visible. So I think these things are happening, but it is also, as Junlin was saying, about the risks that you can take at this moment. But sometimes those risks are where these beautiful new structures are coming from and are being sort of really helping people with their own survival.
Thanks, Tracy. Lizzie.
Yeah. Just to totally agree with that, but to say I think that's also some of the value in coalition, is that it gives you the power to take risk, to challenge. Because I think what we hear a lot across What Next, and have done across the sort of planning and delivery of the early bits of the symposium, is you're very exposed as a freelancer. You know, any challenge that you make, you feel strongly that you're being seen by your future employers, that your livelihood is at stake in that, and the skin you have in the game is really significant. So how we work together as a collective to ensure that we're making that case together, and when we're not putting people in the position of feeling like they're constantly having to put their own head above the parapet all the time, I think is one of the really key things for that going forward. How can we use the power of us all to advance what those individuals need us to do?
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. I love that. Andrew.
Can I just come in on that? I mean, I love all these ideas of big changes, but I think that there's also a fundamental that we all, at some point as a freelancer, we sit and look in the mirror and go, is this really worth it? And actually it is. It's about making those small changes within ourselves, whether you're in a rural place where you haven't talked to anybody, or whether Zoom has saved your life, etc., etc. It is about, we can all make the little changes. For me, if I go into a rehearsal room now, I expect people to behave in a certain way. I expect it to be a kinder, more open, a sharing space. So actually, it's for me, and I think from the Max perspective, is often about finding the little things that we can really change and be in control. So we set out how we expect our interactions to be with bigger organizations, how we expect their organization to be to us, how our future employers, as Lizzie just said, as a freelancer, doesn't say, oh, well, they're this because they present as this or they do this. I think it's keeping the conversation going, the allyship, but also don't be frightened of thinking, actually, can I make a little change in what I do on a day-to-day basis and how I execute my work or how I execute my vision or my contacts with other organizations. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Really love these contributions. We're coming to the end of the session very shortly. It is 6 minutes to 2 at the moment if you're in the live session, and so we've got about sort of 5 or 6 minutes to go. So I'm planning shortly to do a little bit of a closing and advertisement for some of the other things that are either on our website if you're watching a recording, or are about to happen later this week if you're here live. I'd love to just answer or respond to that question too. And I think from a People Make It Work perspective, we would notice 2 things that relate to making space for change. And one is that probably the changes that we want to make won't be things that require a huge amount of new time and capacity. Whenever people say to us, organizations say to us, we'll get to the change when we've got some extra space, you know, at the end of this season, or I'm always like, you won't, like, because that time will come and you'll still be constrained. So what we're actually often looking for are solutions that work within our constraints at the moment. What might work now might work for the future. And so there's something in that space about what if it is, as Andrew was saying, a tiny change in what we ask for, an increased confidence to make certain demands, or to expect certain behaviours, or to feel able to articulate our needs. And those things, like, of course, they still require time to kind of commit to and hear and think, but they're kind of real-time shifts rather than like long-term investments. And the other thing that I find really helpful in this space is the idea, I'm a gardener, so I like to think about a horticultural metaphor. So for that, that's about how do we create the conditions for the things we want to grow. So that helps me when I'm thinking, I can't maybe make change now, but I can create an environment where that change is more likely to happen in the future. So that might be stating my values more clearly, or creating a rider that I share that changes how people relate to me, being clearer about my boundaries, whatever it might be. So those things I might not be expecting change now. I might be kind of creating conditions that make it more likely later. And some of those things don't cost quite as much of us in the moment. Be really interested to hear other views, and there are more questions in the chat and more contributions and ideas. We've got a place for those within this programme on Mighty Networks. If you go to the Freelance Futures website and click in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the menu. You can click on Community and join Mighty Networks. The idea is that's a space for these kinds of conversations across all of us who are coming together to make together more equitable conditions for working in the cultural sector. And that's the space where debates and discussion can happen, comments and links can be shared, and you might be inventing other conversations and sessions that you'd like to hold. Feel free to do that in that space. In the last 2 minutes then, I'd like to make a little advert for the closing reflection session, which will be on Friday of this week, on the 17th of June, between 1 and 2:30, which will be some of us, representatives of the coalition of Freelance Futures partners, reflecting on what we've been learning and hearing. In the meantime, you might well be interested in some of the other brilliant things that are happening this week. On Wednesday, we have a What Next session. We've got to talk about pay with Katsia Batul, who's head of Equalities and Strategy at TUC, and Louise McMillan, who's Deputy Secretary General of Equity, amongst others. An independent leadership session being run by Tracy, she mentioned it earlier on, features Laura Kristeva, Vijay Patel and Emma Blake-Morsey. And that's a little bit later this week. We've also got a Power of Mentorship. I think that sounds like a really interesting session with Narelle Islam and Tian Glasgow on Thursday. So across all of that, you'll also see every day some wellbeing sessions, some daily dancing. So a host of things, hopefully, that fuel us all in this journey together. Right now, it's 2 o'clock if you're watching live. I'd like to thank the panel and look forward to seeing you, hearing you throughout Freelance Futures. Thanks very much for now. Bye.